Before we get into the show today, I want to make a special note that this episode has a myriad of triggers in it. If you're listening to this with your kiddos, be prepared to have a very serious conversation afterwards. Not only does it contain subject matter that isn't for all ages, but even as an adult, I needed to take the rest of the afternoon off after stopping this recording. So please take this as a reminder to care for yourself and the people around you. Just do that in general, but especially as you listen to the rest of Marie's story. Marie Schaeller is an author from Eastern Pennsylvania, hoping to raise awareness of child sexual abuse in our communities and what we can do about it. Her first book is titled Breaking the Chains of Silence and is just one facet of these efforts to advocate for victims of this tragedy, which unfortunately occurs in every community. In her own community, Marie has assisted in attempts to get the Pennsylvania House Bill 1947 passed. This bill would stop allowing predators to get a time out of justice, which, as Marie explains later, would greatly benefit child victims later in life. Marie has graciously offered Bare Naked Bravery listeners a free copy of Chapter 13 of her book. It details how she turned the pain of losing a mentor into joining a writing class. And through this class, she met her tribe and gained a powerful sense of community with writers of all ages, educations, and backgrounds. She's not alone. I'm with her. Writing has truly helped both she and I to wrap our heads around some hurdles and heartbreak over the years. And I know that she feels really blessed for meeting these talented writers, and I do too in my own way. Marie's hope is to let survivors know that they are not alone and that there are ways to move forward. That is my hope as well, and it is the reason why I chose to feature such a triggering story like Marie's. It is important to remember that bravery is not always made of shiny and bright unicorns and fairy dust. Bravery also exists in extreme darkness and the fresh hell that is sometimes forced upon us. So I urge you to listen closely. If you hear what I heard in Marie Schaeller's story, then you will walk away a braver, more beautiful citizen and community member as a result. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Bare Naked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Are you ready for some Bare Naked Bravery?
I am. I'm excited.
Marie, I am really glad that you're with us today. And we were just talking about the fact that Marie is not actually your real name.
Correct.
I'm not going to ask you what your real name is because that's the whole point. But give us the point. Like, why are you going by a pen name?
I chose a pen name because when I was writing my book originally, I didn't tell my family until the book was completed. I did it to protect their privacy and also my own privacy too, because the perpetrator is still out there and he lives very close to me, so it's just a safety net that I used. But I found during the writing process that I could really go into stuff that I wouldn't tell people in my daily life just because I knew my name wasn't going to be on the cover.
Yeah. So go as deep as you'd like, but what happened?
Well, I'm the oldest child of my parents, and everybody kept telling them how important it was for children to be in daycare. So my parents had just put me in daycare, and I was there for about 3 months. I made some friends, but the owner's husband was like a caretaker, and he would show up during the day and stuff. And the one day at nap time, he took me away from the other children, and he took me to an upstairs apartment where he raped me. And he threatened that my parents would be killed if I told anybody. So I was very scared, and there were a lot of threats that he gave me. And I didn't originally tell them when I got home, but that night I was spending the night
And you were how old again?
3 years old.
Ugh.
So like I was very scared, and at 3 years old you don't really have the language to even know what happened to you. It was just frightening, very scary.
Well, so
yeah. It's a lot to put out on.
It is, and I'm really glad you just went full bare naked right there. Okay, so what kind of words did you end up using? How did you communicate what happened to your parents?
I actually didn't say anything. I was at my grandmother's that night, and she had to give me a bath, and she noticed that something wasn't normal for a 3-year-old, and I wouldn't let her touch me at all. I started having like a panic attack, sort of like just freaking out, and she knew it wasn't normal for me.
Yeah.
So my grandmother, when she looked at it, she knew something was bad, and she cried and cried, and she put some like Vaseline and stuff there, and she called my parents.
Wow.
So like she was very, very brave. Just,
Yeah. I mean, what do you have to say for other people who are not bystanders, but people who notice something's off, something's wrong?
Go with your gut. Go with your gut. If you see something, say something. It's just really important because, like, especially when you're being threatened in that kind of situation, you're always told to listen to what the adults tell you to do. So when the adult's telling you this is a secret, you can't tell anybody, if you tell, your parents are going to get hurt, it's really important for other people to step forward. And if you think something's wrong, say it.
Yeah. I think being brave, in that instance, your grandma was brave for you.
Right.
Because you were like developmentally unable to communicate what happened. And then you also were being blackmailed. You were not actually able, like emotionally, to communicate what happened.
Right. It was a scary time not knowing what to say. And then when I did say anything, most people would cry. Like I told people like at the dinner table, this is what he did to me, and everybody would get upset. So I got to the point where I realized like the more I said, the more it upset other people. It affected a lot of my family just because they had to take me to the hospital. I had to be examined. I had to get tested for STDs at 3 years old. And luckily my parents believed me, and they never took me back to daycare because that's really difficult. A lot of people don't have that when they tell people that they're believed. I was believed, so I was thankful that my parents believed me, but it was still very difficult.
Yeah. What was it like as you were there as a 3-year-old? I mean, I don't remember much from when I was 3, but can you remember what it felt like to know that your grandma was going to do something about it?
Pretty good. Like my grandmother's somebody that I can completely trust. Yeah. Going to her house, it was always the kind of place where I felt safe, and she always made the best food. Everything was better at Nana's house kind of deal.
Yeah.
But this is really complicated, but I was actually hypnotized to forget after a while because I was having nightmares and I kept talking about it, and I was wetting the bed at night, and they were going through a court process. And like after the whole court process fell through and they never charged him, I ended up getting hypnotized. So I didn't remember anything until I was around 15, 16. I I started having the flashbacks, and they're so vivid, and like I don't even know how to describe how vivid it is, because the emotions that you feel, it was very weird because I knew I was a teenager, but in my nightmares I was a kid trying to run and hide in the little Tykes playhouse.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember them.
Yeah, I do.
There was one in the backyard at the daycare. I never had one at my house, but there was one at the backyard of the daycare, and he had to take me outside of the daycare to go up outside steps, and that's when I tried to run into the playhouse. And that's when he grabbed me and he forcefully carried me up the steps. So that's what my nightmares started, and that's how the memories started coming back.
I cannot describe how I'm feeling right now because I don't have the words, but it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, it was very scary too, because I thought I was going crazy at first. I just started having these like nightmares and they wouldn't go away. And that's when I started asking questions.
What kind of questions?
I started to worry that I was adopted because people didn't like to talk about my childhood when I was little. Like I noticed things like they would talk about my sister, who's 3 years younger than me, and they would talk about her when she was, drinking a bottle and stuff like that. And they didn't talk about those years for me as much. And at the time, like, I didn't know why. So I started to worry that I was adopted and they didn't want to tell me. So there's just a lot of different things that were running through my head at the time. I just didn't have the courage to ask my parents about it because I thought they'd think I was crazy.
But I mean, clearly here you are as an adult and now you figured it out.
Yeah. I actually used my writing assignment to approach my mom about it. I asked her to proofread a paper and I wrote it about my nightmare flashbacks. And when she read it, she knew what I was talking about. And she started to ask me, like, what do you remember? And that started our conversation. But it was hard too, just seeing my parents cry about it, because it brought up a lot of memories for them too, because they were investigated and they were asked questions that your parents, it's really difficult to hear.
Yeah.
On top of everything else.
Of course. And I'm sure for them and for you, there's so much shame and guilt wrapped up in completely valid shame and guilt and valid is the wrong word, but like understandable is
right.
Really what I'm going for.
Yeah. I knew what you meant.
I don't know if shame is always valid, but it's understandable completely that a parent would not want to talk about this happening to their child. So, I mean, you mentioned a court proceeding and that he's still at large.
Yeah.
What was that process like? I mean, everybody we see Law and Order SVU.
It was nothing like that.
I believe it.
It was heartbreaking.
How old were you during the court proceedings?
I was still 3.
Okay.
And I just, towards the end of it, I turned 4. After going to the pediatrician, they sent me to the hospital for the full medical scan and to do the STD testing. And they took measurements of the cuts and stuff. So, my uncle had to go with me for that. Him and my mom were in the hospital. They had to listen to me scream. And then after that, they sent me to children and youth. And they were awful. They literally told my parents that this kind of thing doesn't happen to a 3-year-old. Those were the exact words from the director of children and youth. So that was devastating. And they ended up doing a lie detector test for all the male members in my family, including my uncle, who was only 12 years old at the time. And all the way up to my grandfather and my great uncle. So all these people in my life were literally ripped apart, and they had to take a lie detector test. There were questions as to when my grandparents had sex, how often, did people make lewd comments at the kitchen table? And that went for my parents as well. They took my parents into separate rooms. Each one of them was questioned, and they tried to put some doubt into their heads about well, do you really know where your husband was? Or do you really know what your wife was doing on such and such a date? So that part was horrible. And the whole time I kept on saying it was this man, and they would never pursue that. And it was just like, that was difficult.
Did the police officer, I mean, when did they pursue this guy?
So like, that's the really difficult part too, because like after children and youth, they sent it to the state police, and they also have to tell the local police officers that, you know, they're going to be investigating. But the head of the police officer in that specific town, they actually knew this guy and went right to him and told him. So they never got to do an investigation. The daycare knew about it right away. And like, it kind of completely blew everything.
I'm sorry. I got really, really angry.
I know. I'm still angry about this.
They just went to him and told him?
Yeah, the police chief went to him. Like, he knew him. He just went to him and he told him that
excuse me, but what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to take. It is so hard to take. Like, that part bothers me, like, probably the most. And
I am so angry right now.
I know. And it was just, yeah, it was just one bad thing after another. But I just remember distinctly talking to police officers and them not just like talking over top of my head between the two of them. And that's what I remember the most about the police, was just that like when they would ask me questions, they wouldn't listen to my answer, and they would just talk over top of me like I couldn't hear them.
Wow.
And like even now, like when I see a police officer, I do get nervous. It's a trigger for me.
Yeah.
Because it takes me to a time when like I just feel like they're not going to believe me no matter what happens.
Now, I want to come back to the proceedings because I am really curious about how that panned out. But zooming forward to today, have you noticed, or through your recovery process, what were some of the triggers for you? Like some other triggers. You had the police. Every time you saw the police, you get a little anxious. Anxious.
Yeah, I get very nervous, and it probably comes across as being super weird. But I can't breathe. But I get really bad too. Like if somebody touches me at all, like it could be something innocent, like a coworker putting their arm around me, and I clam up. Like that's one of my biggest triggers. I don't like to be touched, especially if I don't know the person. But even sometimes somebody that I love, if they hug me, it's really difficult to explain, but it feels like my skin's crawling.
But it's understandable.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, sometimes I don't want to be hugged either.
I know.
Probably for very different reasons. I think personal space is an important thing.
3 feet is personal space at all times is kind of my rule. like I get really nervous when people are close talkers. When they talk really close to your face like that, I don't like that.
Were there any moments throughout, after the court proceedings wrapped up and everything, were there any moments that really took you by surprise, like your reaction to someone else or some situation?
I would say like the biggest surprise was it was later on when I was a teenager, because this man actually came into my workplace.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm serious. And I wasn't prepared for it. I just talked to my parents about this, and it was like maybe a year after I finally talked to my parents. And I have to explain something too, because my best friend, I got her a job at the place that I worked. It was a farmer's market. So we worked under the table, and I got her the job. And later that summer, she said she was going to apply for another job over the summer at a daycare. And I asked her which daycare. And she told me the daycare that I was raped at. And I was like, I panicked because at that point I hadn't told any of my friends. So I made the decision. I'm like, I have to tell her before she applies for this job. And I told her, and she still applied for the job, and she got it. So she started to work at the daycare where this happened. And just so like I felt betrayed just because she's supposed to be my best friend. And I told her something very, very deep. And I thought that, I don't know what I thought. I thought she wouldn't apply for the job at least, because I know I wouldn't have. because just out of respect, I would not have wanted to be in that kind of a situation. Because I mean, I don't, yeah. But he stopped by because he knew she worked there, and
He
I
stopped
had
by your place of work
because she worked with me at the market too. So I wasn't prepared to see him face to face, and I didn't want him to know what I looked like, because the last time he seen me, I was a toddler. So I wanted to be anonymous. I didn't want him to know what I looked like, but I tried not to. Like on my insides, I was freaking out, and I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to yell and point at him and be like, "This guy is so awful," but it would have just made me look crazy. So I tried to like be real, because I'm a really quiet person. So I just kind of went outside, like I was taking a break, and I just cried outside because I didn't want him to see that he affected me.
Of course.
But I wasn't ready for that. Like even now, I wouldn't be ready to like run into him somewhere.
Do you still live in the same area?
I do.
Yeah.
And when I wrote my book, I actually searched to see his address, and he lives about 5 minutes away from me. He lives in the same town as me still. So like that part was hard to digest, because like I never wanted to know, because just for my own sanity, I didn't want to know how close he was.
Do you find yourself taking different ways to get to places to avoid things?
Yes. I'm nervous whenever I go for gas. What if I just happen to stop the same time he's stopping? What if I go to the grocery store? I try to vary my routine because I'm always afraid that, like, what if he's watching me? It's very hard. Like, I know rationally that I shouldn't be thinking like that, but the fear is still there yet.
No, I think it's very rational. I actually think it's very rational.
It's just like safety is number one, and I try to do things that I think that will make me safer.
Okay, let's go back to the court proceedings, because I have so many other questions, but I feel like we should just go back to finish the story and then or not finish the story. It's still ongoing, clearly. With the court proceedings, how long did it take? You're 3 years old.
Yeah, like I want to say it was probably drawn out to about like 8 months, maybe. It was 84 and 85. After the 9 polygraphs, my grandfather was actually named as a possible suspect because he failed the polygraph test. The reason that he failed was because he was bipolar, and his doctor said he should have never taken a polygraph test because his bipolar was pretty severe, and he was on medicine for it and stuff. And I know that my grandfather never did that.
Right.
But children and youth kind of jumped on it just because they had a bad polygraph test.
Well, and I'm sure on their end, it made sense to go for close family members before anyone else.
Right. It was very hurtful.
Of course.
That's when they really investigated like different things, and and like my grandfather's doctor sent in a note saying, like, he's on this medicine and it completely eliminates his sex drive, which, like, I have no idea how he felt having all his personal stuff put out there. But he actually passed away before I remembered when I was a teenager. So I've never got to have that conversation with him. Like, I never got to clear the air and say, like, I know you didn't do it. Like, I just never got a chance to have that conversation before he passed away.
Yeah.
And that really bothered me. Because then my grandfather and my grandmother, like, he had just retired earlier that year. They had to spend money to get his name expunged off the record. So that was pretty much the end of it, and nothing kind of happened after that.
And this guy, the daycare guy, did they ever take him in?
No. And his alibi that he gave, because I have some interview testimony, and his alibi that he gave, he said he was on a business trip. When they actually called the airline said he actually came home 2 days earlier than what he said he did. And his wife covered up for him.
Wow.
Yeah, she's the one that told them on the phone that he came back like 2 days later. So like that part is devastating to read the testimony and see it written in black and white that like he lied about this. How did you not catch on to that? That part was horrifying to me. To be able to read the testimony as a teenager, I understood it obviously a lot more than I would have at 3 years old. But like just to read all that stuff, and I just don't understand how they came to the same conclusions that they did.
Before we get back to the episode today, I'd like to remind you that sometimes I sit on these episodes for months at a time, which means that for members of the Business of Bravery book club, they get access to these interviews way ahead of time before they get aired publicly. It also means that members of the Business of Bravery book club get to have live Q&As with the authors directly, which is really cool. It also means that members of the Business of Bravery book club get to have monthly book club meetings with myself and other creative entrepreneurs to talk about a curated book of the month related to business. But it's not always just a business book. Sometimes it's memoirs, biographies, etc. So you are welcome to join us. Go to businessofbravery.com/book club if you are interested in having some raw, honest conversations with today's author or other creative entrepreneurs and myself, then we would love to have you. businessofbravery.com/book club. I know that your book has meant a lot to a lot of people. I can't imagine it not, first of all. That's just first. Secondly, I know that because you and I are connected on this on the social medias. I know that you have done some political work or lobbying work.
Yeah. And I was just in Harrisburg yesterday. They only have 6 days left in the session before they end for the year, and they're trying to pass House Bill 1947 to extend the statute of limitations. So it's right now it's a really big push. Everybody's really pushing it.
Well, I know that this episode won't air until afterwards, so we'll have to a small follow-up email or something from you. I know that we will want to hear what came up. But what's up for grabs with this bill?
House Bill 1947, it will extend the civil limitations from 30 up until 50 years of age, because I'm actually 35 years old, so I have no civil rights as of right now. I do have criminal rights. Like in the state of Pennsylvania, you can still file criminal charges up until the age of 50. So the House bill will essentially make the criminal and civil the same age. But they're meeting a lot of resistance with all the Catholic dioceses and that kind of a thing. So there's a lot of big money doing some big lobbying in Harrisburg right now. So that's the main push against the bill, is because they feel like they're going to lose a lot of money if this goes through. The most important part to me is just to make sure that you leave an avenue open to people, because this doesn't just affect me, but it also affects anybody else that he comes into contact even now. So potentially I'd like to be able to press charges just so that, he goes on the database for being a sexual predator. So that way he can't get hired in different places like schools and like around.
Or he can't live above a daycare.
Right. Like you can't live close to a playground, like just anything. And I don't understand why parents wouldn't want survivors to come forward so that they do know their kids are safe.
I'm sure there's a lot of things up in question with this, but is really the protection of or the advocating of your fellow citizens, is that the main difference that this bill would provide?
Yeah. And just keeping that, because they're trying to make it retroactive, which is the real holdup. Because there's certain parts of the Constitution that certain people read one way and others read another way. Mm-hmm. So the constitutionality of the retroactive part is what's making it kind of a little bit bumpier. Right now, our Attorney General that's sitting in, because our other one has been put in jail, Well, she's pending her sentence, I should say. She's not in jail, but he actually said he's for it, and that it does not go against the Constitution. So,
and the retroactive, if that bill goes into effect. So then, if the bill goes into effect in 6 days, then you can retroactively press charges.
right. I would have the civil option as well, because the biggest problem is that even with the criminal charges, which I'm pursuing, there's a chance that the prosecutor won't want to take my case, and then that's the end of the road for me, which I think is awful, because I feel like everybody should have a way into the justice system. To literally leave it up, like after the police officers do their investigation and then come up to the prosecutors, if they're just too busy, they might not be able to take my case.
Yeah.
Which is heartbreaking, but it's worth a shot.
It is. Oh, 2 hands here for it is. I'm really struck by the fact that the court proceedings passed when you were little, and here you are now, 35, you're still dealing with the ramifications of what this meant for you in your life. And I'm really, really struck by the strength of will to move forward with this, because I think that a lot of people would just like move out of the city.
Not to say that hasn't crossed my mind.
Oh, I'm sure it has.
But yeah, my whole family lives close by, and I feel like if I completely run away, that I'll always look over my shoulder.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing that just really makes me want to do this now. Because when I was in my 20s, that was something that I did. I moved away, I went to school, and I thought it'd be better there, but it wasn't, because I was still looking over my shoulder. So like, that's the best thing that I learned in my 20s, was that you can't outrun it when it's inside. You just can't.
Writing that down.
Because I did some destructive things. I had relationships that definitely weren't anything that I would call healthy. I definitely learned from that, and it has helped me get to where I am today. Like and I really appreciated when somebody posted on social media, the line from victims to survivor is never straight. It loops back around, it goes in circles, it's squiggly lines, it's everything. Just seeing that, it meant a lot to me, because, like you see people that have everything put together and stuff, you're like, I am just so far behind that. It's just great when you see somebody say like, hey, it's rough. You could have a good day and then you could have 10 bad days. You just don't know. But you're going to have another.
I agree. I think, recovery and grief and everything that's attached to it. It's like a big hairy ball of gross. Yes. But it is not a straight succession of steps.
Right. And just knowing that, especially when you're at a really rough point, when you hear that from somebody else, it just totally changes your mindset. So you're like, all right, I could do this. I just tried to focus on the good days. And then like I told myself, if you just keep on trucking a little bit further, you're going to hit another good day sooner or later.
It's true. It's at that point. I mean, I have definitely been there for my own reasons. I have been there where all you can do is just go to sleep and hope that when you wake up in the morning, it will be a little bit better.
Yes. Sleep is definitely an escape for me, that and reading. There's certain days where, I just don't want to face some things. I just kind of escape in a good book and take a nap. I just always feel better.
I completely concur. I completely agree with you on that some days it's just better to call it a mulligan and just start over. But how do you know whether to do that or not?
Usually by my writing, if that makes any sense. I try to do writing, like morning pages kind of deal. And usually I can tell when it's getting really bad. Like if I just sound whiny, then it's time to do something. But
I'm a big fan of morning pages. It's just, do you do the 3 pages stream of consciousness? Just
yes.
Full on?
Yes. And some days I can catch myself. I can do it in 45 minutes. And then other days it'll take me an hour and a half to do them. But I have to sit there and do it because I just found that action helps for me. So like when I'm really having a bad time of it, if I do something like writing or, walking outside or just painting, anything, if just doing something, like the action will make me feel better. Because I can be a moper sometimes. So I can't let myself think about it too much.
What was it like to write this book for you?
I have never cried this much in like consecutive days. I followed the SPS protocol and I tried to write every day. So I tried to do like an hour.
Marie and I know each other from a program, from a course that we're taking called
Yeah.
and it's claims that you can do it in 90 days, but here I am like 9 months in and when you're writing, I think when you're writing something that is as impactful, writing about an event that is as impactful as the one that you wrote about, or in my case, a subject matter that is not just a quick, like, yeah, here's the 10 steps to do XYZ. It's not going to take you 90 days. It's going to take you possibly 90 days of the crying and the migraines and the like full body processing.
Yes, and you want the process to take the time that it's going to take. You don't want to put a certain date on it. But I kind of just sat down and I tried to write every single day. Even if I just wrote that I cannot write today, that's what I wrote for like 45 minutes to an hour. I wrote, I cannot write today. But most of the time, like once I sat down and physically started to write, because I wrote it out by hand, because I feel like it's different using the keyboard as compared to using a pen. I felt like I could get more out of me using a pen. So I wrote the whole thing out by hand and it was draining. There were certain days that I had to get up and walk away because I was crying so bad. And like you said, the migraines from all the crying, my eyes were burning. I didn't want to look at anything afterwards. And it was really bad too, because there was a lot of stuff going on in the news at that time, because the Altoona Johnstown, which is in Western Pennsylvania, their diocese was investigated and they did a grand jury report. There were so many priests that they named in this jury report. So it was on the news constantly. So then that would set me off at night seeing that, because that's a big trigger that I forgot to mention, just the news. Whenever somebody else comes forward, it brings up a lot of stuff for me. Seeing them being victim shamed brings up a lot for me, because it's hard to swallow when you see somebody else going through something that you've been there.
Right. Oof.
Yeah.
How did you choose? I mean, I know that you chose to do a pen name to protect your family members, but what freedom did that allow you in your own telling of the story?
I went deeper than I would have gone if I didn't use a pen name. I talked about some things that were very personal to me, because it's stuff you only tell your best friend kind of thing. You don't really want to share it to the world. But
like you're doing right now.
yeah, like this. But like when I had a one night stand and I did it for all the wrong reasons. There's nothing wrong with the one night stand if that's where you're at, but I wasn't okay. And I did it for the wrong reasons. And I thought that maybe it would, unlock part of my memories. And that was the wrong reason to do something like that. So writing about that was very difficult for me, because I was worried about being judged for even mentioning that part. Because it's not something I tell everybody, but I thought it was important if there was somebody else out there that needed to hear, this is destructive for me and I did it for the wrong reasons, and please don't do it. If they could learn from me, that's why I did it. Just hoping that, because I don't know, I felt alone a lot. And if somebody else out there just read my book and thought, hey, I'm not the only one that is going through this or thought these things in my head, sort of deal. And it's weird, because that's what people say meant a lot to them. The stuff that was hard for me to put in the book is the stuff that people bring up most, which makes me feel like, all right, I'm glad I put it in there. Even though it was difficult, and I definitely deliberated over it many, many times, but I'm glad that I did it if it can help somebody else. Save them a little bit.
What kind of responses have you gotten from your readers, your new readers?
It's weird to even say that I have readers. But the biggest one has been people telling me about their stories. And then at the end of telling me their stories, just saying, you're the first and only person that I've told. And some of these people are senior citizens and they've lived their whole life feeling like they couldn't tell anybody and kept a secret. And like, I can't imagine, like, it was hard for me to keep my secret as long as I did, but I can't imagine what some people went through. And it's been just overwhelming. And I'm very grateful that I could just be an ear for somebody, because I know, like, there's just times that you just want somebody to be an ear for you, just to hear you. Just meant a lot.
I would, like, my heart would just want to, like, if I got an email from a reader that told me something so intimate, I would want to do something, but you can't do everything for everyone.
Right. I wanted to hug people too. And I'm like, most of them were like through emails or on Facebook and that kind of thing. And I'm like, just want to give them a hug just to let them know that, like, I'm here. But it's crazy. Just to be able to connect with people, though, has just really been the biggest gift that I could have ever asked for. And just the number of people that have come out in my own personal life, like my friend's mom has said some things to me, just people that I actually know and see every day have said something. And even in my own family, other people have come out in my extended family and said that something's happened to them. I just feel like saying too, like, I wish I would have said something when I was younger, because I suffered all those years in silence when I had a really great support system that I didn't utilize.
Well, but you didn't know.
Right. Right. That's the other part of it, though. And I still wouldn't know if it wasn't for me just actually being able to talk about it. So that's my biggest takeaway, is just to be able to, I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I was nervous about releasing it, but afterwards I felt so much better.
Yeah.
So much better.
So the book that I have yet to finish is all about creative courage. And there's a whole chunk in there that I am actually really proud of, this side of it, because I think a lot of people see bravery and courage as being this, like, unwieldy, like, at all costs, like, just do it, go for it and do it kind of thing, choice that you go out and make. But I think that bravery is actually bravery and courage and creativity too. They are something that is very, very analytical. The choice is to be brave, the choice to be creative, all of these things. They require boundaries and vulnerability at the same time.
Yes.
Like, it's not just like, you're not just out there flashing everyone on the street, being vulnerable with everyone.
Right.
The real bravery is, I guess if we're going to take that metaphor further, it's flashing your neighbor, which is equally hilarious to think about. However, I really admire your choice to use a pen name, because it is very much protects you. It frees you and protects you.
Right. It's a nice combination of the two.
And I also think that it's a choice that some people, I think, would think that maybe that was like an easy out. Just use a pen name, it'll make it easier. But it actually was not just an avoidant choice. It was an intentional choice towards something.
Right. And it felt right at the time. I had a lot of people that said, don't use a pen name. I went with my gut.
Yeah.
I knew for me, that's what I needed. So I did it. It has made things more complicated. Like explaining to the post office person why you need a PO box for a fake name. Like that, it gets a little bit confusing to them, because they're like thinking that you're like doing something weird. But like just every step I've tried to take to put protective measures in just to be safe. And even if it doesn't in the long run make me safe, it made me feel safe, which is all at the end of the day that I can do is I can make myself feel safe. I can't protect myself from other people, but I can make myself as safe as I can possibly be.
Other than getting a P.O. box and a pen name, how have you made yourself safe?
That's a really good question. I try to make sure that my schedule varies. I try not to do the same thing like say I go to the grocery store every Saturday. I try not to do stuff like that.
And this is for not seeing the dude.
Right. Yes. And just, they tell women that it's something that you should do so that people don't know your schedule so that they can plan for stuff. So I've adapted that into my daily routine. And I've gotten to the fact that everybody gets judged on an internal safety scale for me. When I see somebody, I know right away where they're at on the scale. And I never get left alone in a room with somebody that's on the high end of the scale because I don't feel safe. And just every time I'm in the room, I know where the exits are. I don't like to be left in a room with somebody that I don't know. And just to ensure that that does not happen. If I'm out drinking, I make sure that I don't get too drunk because I don't trust other people.
And these are things that are like common sense. Like it sounds.
Yes, it does, but I make sure that it happens because I don't.
Well, I mean, when you list all of those things out, it makes you, I'm going to be honest, it makes you sound a little paranoid. But,
yes.
But when I look at each individual thing, I do the same thing.
Yes, it's good habit to get into.
Oh, yeah.
Just to be safe. Like, I don't know, like I always make sure that I know where the exits are and who's standing behind me. Like I don't like people standing behind me either. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to explain.
So something gets you when you got to protect the instincts that you have.
Right. They're there for a reason.
Yes.
So you have to listen. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yay for listening. I just have to say this again because you said this out loud. You can't outrun it when it's inside. And I think that that's a really, it's a really powerful truth that when the thing you're running from is inside of you, you can't run fast enough or far enough. And I want to tell anyone who's listening who resonates with anything that Marie and I have said today, that it is really important that you find the safety that exists and to trust it, whether the safety exists within your own self or within one or many people around you. The safety that exists, and it does exist for you.
Yes.
The safety exists and it is in existence so that you have choice in how you deal with your own life. And I really appreciate you, Marie, for finding the safety and for choosing a pen name and for choosing a voice to use. I think that's something that is invaluable, especially in the midst of such heinous situations.
Yes, definitely. It's saved me so many times. It's definitely worth it.
Before we close out today's show, here is an update from Marie on the Pennsylvania House Bill 1947. She told me, unfortunately, the bill, after being gutted in the Senate, returned to the House of Representatives, but never made it out of the Rules Committee to get to the floor for a vote. There were other issues that overshadowed it, like the opioid crisis and the pension reform. The session closed without it being voted on. She also told me that Pennsylvania House Representative Mark Rozzi has a plan to reintroduce the bill in this legislative session in 2017 and pick up where last year left off. She told me that he will not give up. This is a personal fight for him, and he can relate to survivors because he was abused by a priest when he was younger, as well as some of his friends, which Unfortunately, one of them committed suicide, so it is very personal. She also told me that the new attorney general that was voted in agrees that the retroactivity part of the bill is constitutional, and that was the main complaint of the Senate when they gutted it. So having the attorney general support the bill is very hopeful. She gave me an article that sums up the bill and the end of the session, and that is available in the show notes, which you can also get, as I mentioned earlier, chapter 13 of her book in the show notes of this episode. Just go to barenakedbravery.com and search for Marie Schaeller. We would love to hear all about your most meaningful parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery. You can find Marie Schaeller and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and more. Just go ahead and tag us so we can cheer you on and see what you're up to. That's our show this week. I really appreciate all of your listening ears and your willingness to hear some difficult things. Again, I put all the links to Marie's website and her book and the free chapter and the article on the update for the House Senate bill. So just be sure to visit us online for all of that. Again, barenakedbravery.com. If you are digging the music in today's episode, that is because it is brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, go to barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. I'm really looking forward to being with you next week. We have some awesome things in store for you. Until then, though, I have one message for you. It is this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.